Okay, so we'll start with this group. Their question is, and they will tell us what the answer is. Their question is, what is zone or flexible development? You could put that up. Give us a little, everybody can move over this way if you'd like to see, or if you're comfortable sitting where you're sitting. Oh, we're knocking things over, okay.
Okay, great. All right, so the zone of proximal development is the difference between what a learner can do without help and what he or she can do with help. Learning always precedes development. Lower limit of the zone of proximal development is the level of skill.
Say ZPD.
Oh, thank you.
Now we're into the lingo.
Is the level of skill reached by the child working independently. The upper limit is the level of skill the child can reach with assistance from an instructor. The ZPD isn't stagnant. It continuously changes as the learner can achieve more difficult work over time. The more knowledgeable other can be anyone from a parent, teacher, a peer, tutor, sort of things like that. Internalization is knowing how, tasks that were initially outside and beyond the child. So, and here's like a little chart. So, your child's current development and what they can achieve on their own. Then you have the zone of proximal development, is what they can do with the assistance of the more knowledgeable other. And then anything outside of that circle is just beyond their reach at the present time.
So does anybody have any questions for them? Does anybody have anything to add? Did anybody read more beyond that? They want to add more?
Is this getting used? Is this something that, I don't know, in school systems they...
Yeah, we used it. Like it was a terminology that we used all the time as far as like...
In Colorado?
In Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, in Texas. And so we would use that to talk about like where we want to push our kids, but then also not pushing them beyond their limits, just as far as like when we're teaching them. So making sure that we're challenging them, but not getting outside of their zone of proximal development.
They use it for business too. Like I went to this ridiculous conference thing and they were talking about how to develop your employees, and they were talking about this.
This?
Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. And you know what? We're going to find some crossover, and that's probably why, Jerome Bruner is in the law school, because there are some theories that cross over that sometimes models from business work in education, and sometimes they don't. But models such as like organizational theory and things like that come from maybe business, and sometimes we have to sort of look beyond and see where these models are and who can apply them, who can't apply them. And I think that's a great example, Benny, that you've seen that in the business model. Sometimes they don't work though, but sometimes they do. When some group chooses Vygotsky for a theorist to go in depth with, one of the things that we do want to find is obviously nobody's theories are accepted 100%, and there will always be critiques, which is good because then it creates a more serious look at what the theory is. So one of the things that I'll ask each group to do is to find some of the criticism about the models so that you can bring that in so we can deal with that thoughtfully. There is no great example that we should just look at and say, yes, we're just going to take this on 100% because this is perfect. And I think we need to look at everything with some kind of critical analysis. And then through the critical analysis, even if we decide to use something, we will know exactly why we decided to use it, rather than just say it sounds good. One of the things that Jerry Bruner just wrote me in his email was that he's seeing, how did he phrase this? I should have marked this in. He's seeing more examples. In one of the side trips, he goes to Italy every summer to study the program in Reggio Emilia. Does everybody know about that? Okay. But he took a side trip to Madrid, and he said, it's really interesting, but the progressive education movement is making a comeback there. There's a silver lining in the economic downturn. And I think it's fascinating. So he is he's been around the world enough, so he's starting to see trends. Everything kind of goes away and comes back and goes away, and I've talked about that before. So to go back to Benny's question, there have been times when people really criticize this, times when it's coming back, and it's not 100% consistent because obviously different countries in Europe are in different parts of the crisis. Spain is in a much more dire situation than the U.S. is right now. So they're going to be looking at different processes from a different perspective. And we hear a lot about Spain in the media now because of some of the problems. But to go back to this, so what are its implications? Like, what does this actually mean? What do you do with this? Yes.
I think it means that the relationship between the student and the teacher is very important. Like it's a really involved process, and especially for dads, like the learner, like at first learns things just by watching, copying, and then they start to understand more.
Yes.
Once then they can do it on their own, but not at first.
Good. Okay, yes.
And also understand the limit. Whereas with the national training curriculum, how it's set up, that really at this age, this is as far as you should really go.
Right.
You can really handle before you move on to the next step. And so that zone is changing.
Now, that's, so a lot of people, I really don't think, as much as there was a lot of good intellectual input into the national training curriculum, I don't think anybody was sitting around the table and saying, let's consider this a proxy. So I really think that a lot of people figure this out intuitively, but then there are people who just don't. And I think that the prime example I go back to over and over again is the horrific ballet example of like, put a bunch of kids in a competition studio and just give them the most advanced steps because that's what they want to see them. 32 fouettes on point when they don't even have, basic alignment that drives all of us crazy in this room. So that's like the perfect example of the antithesis of this. It's just pushing somebody so beyond there's no basis of grasping anything at all. And so, but that's really important to know. So maybe you've looked at those studios or an example like that in your past and you said there's something about that that just doesn't sit right with me. Now you could go into, let's say you get offered a job and they say, okay, we're a competition studio and this is what I want you to do. Now you can sit down and have a reasonable, conversation, and you don't even have to use these words. So how would you put this in a reasonable conversation with, let's say, a studio owner or parent and say, I really think this is not a very good idea because, finish that sentence, yes.
The health implications of making a child.
Yeah, that's helpful, but just keep it in the frame of this.
Well, but I mean,
Because what? Okay.
Because your child developmentally at this point is not ready to do that step.
Right.
And it's not only their body development, but also their mental capacity. And you could talk about how much achievement a child can have from having the opportunity to master something, and they can't really master something or have it feel like it's in their body if it's beyond their reach.
Right. And
So
all
their
there
sense of
is
achievement is
frustration.
knocked
Right,
down
there's-
all the time.
Right, there's just frustration and injury. Yeah. And another thing that we learn about kids, which has probably helped enough studios to do that for some period of time, is young bodies are incredibly pliable. So things that are just not healthy don't manifest itself as unhealthy right away. Okay? So you can just push them and they'll do all these things because of this amazing pliability. The lack of health implications you see over the long term. It's not like people just fall down with injuries right there and then. And that's the problem. That's why some studios sort of have that mentality like, our kids do just fine. They didn't see them when they're 25. Yes.
I think there's also the other end where people aren't pushing enough,
Yeah.
where they're spending too much time inside what the kids can already do,
Right.
and they're not spending the bulk of their time in that zone of proximal development.
Right. So that's a good thing to think about, is finding that place so that there's enough challenge, but you're not pushing too far. And that's the zone. And think about, that's where that word is really critical. It's a zone, it's not a fixed point. Okay? So you've got to you've got to figure out the zone according to who?
Each individual kid.
Each learner. And that's where teaching gets complicated. Because we do the kind of teaching that's one size fits all, but everybody has a slightly different zone, right? So then things get complex. And that's the other sort of argument against what we call social promotion. Does everybody know what's meant by social promotion? If you don't know, raise your, okay. Social promotion means everybody just goes along with the group. So all the 8-year-olds take this level class and then they move into the next level class because they're all the same age. Or everybody in the 3rd grade in the public school gets moved along to the 4th grade because they've spent a year in the 3rd grade. It has nothing to do with whether they've mastered that level or have achieved what you set out for them to achieve to go ahead. And that's always a hot topic of social promotion. And it exists both in public schools as well as the private sector. People see it in private dance studios all the time. You know, class just sticks together. But social promotion is not really good because some people take longer, you know, they have a different zone. And if the class wasn't individualized enough to help each child move ahead in a place where they can move ahead, then some people didn't get anywhere, and they really need to be left behind is a terrible word, but they really need to remain at that level until they're ready to go ahead. But the reason why it's called social promotion is because if you don't promote, it has the stigma of being left back or left behind. And anybody who's ever had to repeat a grade, I won't ask you to raise your hand because people don't like that stigma, but anybody either skipped a grade or repeated a grade, those have huge implications associated with it. Skipping a grade is excellent for just one part of a person's development, but sometimes it leaves them awkward in other areas. And we've read stories about those, like, you know, child geniuses at age 8, 9, 10, 11 who are in college. You know, so maybe they can keep up with their peers in math class, but what happens when all their peers are going out socializing on the weekends? You know, what's that all about? And where does an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old fit in with that?
We had a 7-year-old like prodigy in our high school.
Oh my.
He was, I went to an arts high school and he was a piano player that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But socially, like, I never saw him at, you know, break or at lunch or anything. I don't know what he did.
Yeah, what did he have in common with everybody else
No.
around him?
It was really cute though. He did perform and like he finished and everyone stood up and his mom was in the front and she was like, take a bow, and he was like, oh, like he'd forgotten that element of his like performance.
Yeah, that is very cute. But there are all sorts of issues, and those are all the things we have to think about, you know. So this just gives you the language for talking with administrators, other teachers, program directors, parents, etc. All this is in the language. Okay, good. Let's move on to, let's see who we have here. Let's go to this group right here. Okay. Listen behind you. It looks painful to me. Yeah. How is the process thing? Are you on the subway coming here? Okay, hello.
So we're talking about the spiral curriculum, and it is based off of General Bruner's theory. And basically, instead of taking something they have and then add on, they're talking about taking something like a basic idea, and then we spiral around to get information, and then we spiral back to the basic idea, and get more, and the basic idea, get more, basic idea. It's not just the basic idea, get the idea, and then be able to apply. And this method is trying to make it easier for the students to grasp the ideas. And it is based on cognitive theory that is easier cognitively for the students. And the students would be able to get the idea and actually create something of their own, other than just getting the information memorized.